All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Axis of Genius podcast. I am David Henry Rickenbach, otherwise known as DH, and I am here with my man Balake, otherwise known as Blake. Uh, so I think we're at episode 8, and we just got some in-person time, which was really, really super fun. And we got to do an in-person pod with our man, Mr. Brooks, which I think we're both feeling pretty excited about being able to share with the world. So, from my point of view, we're in this really sweet spot of going from visionary inspirations into kind of some fun actualizations. And I was actually thinking this morning about how I think in the first podcast I like embarrassed myself by sharing some freestyle poetry, or not freestyle, written poetry, poetry slam, something like this. And I think something to the extent I wrote the line like, as we tour the nation, which, I don't know if I have aspirations to quote unquote tour the nation. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But it was really fun to realize that you flew across the nation, Blake, to be here and, get in on the podcast. And kind of as we get rolling here, I'm excited for more in-person pods and probably stacking up your frequent flyer miles. So yeah. So I've got a whole bunch of things queued up here. It's been really fun to build up our mother culture and just kind of see all the different things that are rolling in as we get ready to hit record on these podcasts. But one of them I was kind of taking notes was that you had some fire around this Jake Paul fight, and we were hanging out at a place where the fight was on whatever it was, like Friday. It was like December, yeah, something, December 23rd,
No, like
20 night,
20th.
December 20th. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So this fight wasn't on my radar at all. And we ended up at a restaurant where it was on at the bar, and then one thing led to another, and we're watching it at home. And there's a lot of things that could be said and probably should be said about it. But I was really bemused because when we were recording with Brooks, he's like, "I definitely don't want to talk about this." And I looked over at you, and I was feeling like, "I think Blake wants to talk about this." So there's different ways we can kind of enter into this one, and maybe you already got some wheels spinning over there. But I thought as like a queuing up man, I do want to get your reaction. I want to get your feels on just like how you relate to this whole phenomenon of someone like Jake Paul and boxing, and just like the phenomena of culture he is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let's find our way in and see where we want to go with this because I'm sure there's a lot to be said. Off the cusp, though, for me, um, it's a really because I'm not watching these fights all the time. I'm not watching every video of Jake Paul. So when I do get these glimpses, watching a Jake Paul fight or something like this, um, it's such a pulse for me on pop culture. Like this is, I think we talked about this, but he is like one of the faces of pop culture. Like when you think about kind of the icons of pop culture in our world, and definitely more so for the younger generations, it's like, Jake Paul is up there. And as we're watching the fight and they're scanning through the crowd, you see all these like young kids who, dropped bands to be there, thousands of dollars to be there, which I feel bad for because it was such a awful fight, to be honest. Um, I
One
feel
of the
bad.
worst fights I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
I feel bad for all the people who bought that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a real glimpse into like pop culture for me, and it's good as well. And within that, there is a feeling of like, damn, like this is really it, like this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so I think alongside that, there is like a deep longing for something new to emerge in pop culture, and I think it's you
Hmm.
know it's not going to be like feminine goddess priestess worshiping kind of vibe in the pop culture. Like I don't think that's where we're at yet, but just like
Hmm.
something with a bit more spice and goodness than like a Jake Paul type of figure.
No doubt.
Because I think ultimately pop culture is like it has to be cool, right? Like it has to be a flavor of cool.
Hmm.
And I feel that part of what you and I are both keying in on is like this training lifestyle.
Hmm.
It's like obsession with training and sharpening the sword and this kind of like samurai archetype, almost like samurai meets like traveling yogi sort of vibe. And
Totally.
for me, there's such a, it's so cool. And
Hmm.
like, again, I'm not saying this is objectively cool as for everyone, but there's like a vibe to that that's so cool. And I guess I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole with this now. But with this kind of like training lifestyle, that is kind of is a new thing for me to fully point the finger at and identify that that actually is such a deep part of me that I'm drawn to, and I know that you feel the same way.
Yeah.
Um, is that I think there would be, I think there is so many people in pop culture, in the masses, that would vibe with that, that would get down with that, that just like haven't really been able to fully taste that. You
Yeah.
know, I think about the vibe of training, and many people's only real experience with that was maybe in sports in like middle school and high school. And that's it. It's like sports, but then most people stop playing sports. Most people don't have, most people don't feel the training vibe within learning or within school and academics and things like this. And so it's like we have that a little bit in sports growing up. And I think for a lot of people who have played sports growing up, like they miss that, they miss that feeling of having something to really train, to really work at, something that they're hungry for, to see results into, and just for the day by day showing up, grinding kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'll kind of pause there and um, hear
Yeah.
what you have to say about that. But I just, you know, I feel that the kind of pop culture sphere almost longing for something like this.
Yeah.
And
And,
that's
and
excites me a lot.
undoubtedly. I think that's kind of where the conversation is heading. But before we go in that direction, I do want to circle back to Jake Paul. It's, you know, in the sort of dialogue of it, I kind of dug a little bit deeper just preparing for this conversation. Like, how do like people, quote unquote, out there, you know, relate to this whole phenomenon? And there's like a whole dialogue about how his stock went up from that whole experience, even though like his fight kind of sucked and you know, arguably from like a sports perspective, it was like one of the worst fights ever. But from like a culture perspective, pop culture perspective, you know, there's all sorts of commentary about like, you know, this is the courage to like sell the possibility. Like he sold the possibility that he could have knocked this guy out, even
Mm,
though this guy was like probably on paper, you know, everyone thought he was just going to get knocked out pretty fast, which
right,
arguably he probably could have been knocked out really fast if this guy wasn't just you know, like a cat playing with his food.
right.
But anyway, the piece that I kind of wanted to circle on before we dive into training and the yearnings for training and self-actualization and all this goodness is
Hmm.
just like kind of tying in something else that you're up to, which is kind of, I think you're on the tail end of a 30-day posting challenge. And I wanted to see if I could thread the needle here
Mm,
on this relationship between perception, someone like Jake Paul, who, you know, I'm imagining as a brand, he's doing everything in his power to spin, you know, how his stock can go up. You know, I had the courage to dream. I, you know, sold the possibility of knocking this guy out. You know, some people are making the comparison that he's not just a fighter, you know, he's selling the arena, so to speak, because he has a promotional company, which from a certain, you know, money perspective, they crushed it on that fight, you know,
yeah,
kind of this like love him or hate him, you're watching kind of vibe.
yeah, yeah.
So there's that whole thing, but the tie-in that I wanted to, you know, see if there's a thematic interconnection is, you know, in your just own process of going through like a 30-day posting challenge, just kind of what's happening in your inner game in terms
Right.
of where are you at with your own sense of perception? You know, is the quote unquote Blake stock going up? Is it going down? Just if you could, I have some other questions related, but maybe as a starting point, if you could just, you know,
Yeah,
double
yeah,
click on your inner world with all this stuff, man.
yeah. Cool. I love this question, and you definitely threaded the needle there. And just with Jake Paul, like love him or hate him, he is going for it.
Hmm.
And I think there is some sort of admiration within that. Like he's just fully going for it. And like what you're saying, his stock went up even though he lost. And I do feel there's this sense, you know, I can imagine that there's a lot of young kids who look at him and just see him like, wow, he's really going for it. wow, he just
Right.
put himself in an arena with something like this. And no matter how authentic that is, no matter how you perceive him as he's going about his things, like there is something to that, you know? There is something to that. Um, but in terms of this, my stock with within my posting challenge, um, I'd say in some way my stock went up, and in other ways my stock went down. Um, and it didn't really go down, but when I say that, I mean I have lost followers. So um, I've been posting every day in December, but I've been posting at least twice a week, probably closer to three, for the past like 3 months or something like this. Um, and over this entire 3-ish month span, I've lost followers. I think it's only been six, but if I go look at it, it's probably like, you know, 80 people unfollowed, 75 people followed, something like this. Um, so in that sense, my stock has gone down. I don't see it that way, but one might be able to see it that way. Um, and in other ways, I think my stock has gone uh, astronomically through the roof. Um, Partly because of that, also. Like, that's such a profound story. I love this frame again that your quote unquote failures really are just the stories that you're going to tell when you've made it. And for me, that this is such a story.
Mm.
I didn't have the experience of an overnight success. I didn't have the experience of, first 5 posts are just going viral and it's easy for me. I've had, the opposite of that, which is the experience that most people probably will have if they choose to do something like this.
Mm.
And I think part of that is this deeper, like mythopoetic test of, um, what do you do when the results don't come back to you in the way that you would like them to?
Yeah.
And I really feel like there is this deeper lesson that you're being asked to pass through. And it's like you keep going. And I've had multiple people that are in the posting sphere with me who I've, had dialogues with who are just so down in the gutters because people that they thought that were going to be supporting them, friends, just haven't shown up on Instagram, and they're doing all this work and they're getting like 5 likes, and I say the same thing to get to them, like keep going, bro. Um,
Yeah.
because really, the name of the game,
Hmm.
especially in the beginning, is reps, 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 reps.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
after a few more reps, then we can actually sit down and start to assess what you're doing, and we can reverse engineer how you might be doing it differently. But
Yeah.
for the most part, it's like reps, 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 reps. And I think,
Hmm.
um, you know, really grokking that,
Hmm.
really grokking that to the point where you stop getting upset after, you've been posting for 2 months and the results aren't there. So, and then just the last piece that I'll say is I think my stock's gone up massively because my muscle of how I'm expressing myself and creativity has 100% gotten way stronger.
Hmm.
Um, and I can still see that I have so far to go from truly being able to say the thing that I want to say and saying it in the way that I want it to say. I
Yeah.
know it's such an infinite game, but um, I
Yeah.
also feel that I've come a really long way.
Yeah.
And I think whether or not people have reflected this to me or they've sent me messages, I personally feel that other people who are in a similar space as you and me, who follow me, definitely, um, hopefully, perceive me as someone who is going for it
Hmm.
and hopefully is doing it in a way that is,
Hmm.
inspiring them to also come onto the playing field.
Yeah.
That's certainly my intention and hope. So, yeah,
Yeah, well, that's kind of exactly where I was hoping this would go because, from my vantage point, your signal is undoubtedly stronger. Granted, I talk to you on a pretty regular basis, but it's really nice to hear it from your perspective. And I'm hoping you can double click on that because I feel like, from the outside perspective, social media is sort of this weird psychological test where we do have this experience where people end up in the gutter, and sometimes people get really dysregulated if a single post doesn't kind of go the way they thought, or there's a whole lot of like trappings and stuff that
yeah,
is a part of the game. And from like the outside perception, say with like your 30-day challenge, one could make the case that like, you're in this weeding out period, or, this sense of like hurting, not hurting. Let's just go with weeding out. We only need one
Hmm.
metaphor. Weeding things out. And, in that process, you're finding your authentic voice. And, through finding your authentic voice, there's going to be way stronger resonance with like people who are really, feeling it. Like the sort of internal resonance of people who are picking up the signal. It's like really, really strong.
Yeah.
But Instagram doesn't really portray those optics. People only see if it has 5 likes or 30 likes or 500 likes. They're not necessarily seeing the way that someone is like coming into your DMs, or someone's coming into your email, or someone's coming into like, becoming a client or something, and just being like, I resonate with this so much. Like this is exactly what I
Right.
needed to hear. So I'm kind of trying to like circle my way into this question of like, what have you been finding, like maybe even present moment, like what is just starting to like be sparked? I think you even said like you feel like you have a long way to go on finding your authentic voice. But
Yeah.
like from where you were even 25 days ago, let's call it, to where you are now, like what do you feel like is just like beginning to get sparked, that you feel like could be like a forest fire in a positive sense?
Yeah. There's so much here. The first thing that comes up to me is that because I'm also doing a lot of other stuff in my life besides posting, there's many days where the idea of posting just feels like so much. It feels like such a big thing to do, and I don't have time and all of this, and there's the pressure, and I have to post today. And so it really forces your creativity to flex in new ways and to stretch and to bend um,
Hmm.
and so one of the ways that my expression has changed a bit is not so, not only posting these really well thought out, nuanced ideas that have many different layers and are very complex. And again, I think there's because I love that sort of thing. I love going down rabbit holes and cool ideas and things like this. And I think that there is a part of me that hides behind that instead of just the raw storytelling of who I am.
Yeah.
Which again, sometimes that's where the ideas land the most, right? Is actually it just in the stories and things like this. But for me, there's a different layer of vulnerability that comes with just telling my story or
Yeah.
just this is my life. Um, and so I think I've slowly started to lean more into that. Also, in that, you know, if I do want a tribe of people who really are resonating with me and
Mhm.
the kind of community vibe, um, I think when I'm on the other side of that, I love to see people that I admire the way they think and things like this, who are also just showing their life, who it's just them in the mundane existence of who they are. So I would say that's definitely one piece that I feel like if I lean into that more, there's going to be some real sparks that continue to ignite. Um, and the fear of that is like they like me for my crazy cool new ideas. Why would they like me just for who I am as an ordinary human being living an ordinary existence? And so there's definitely something there for me.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'd say just a couple other things that came up for me when you were talking. Um,
Mhm.
one, within the 30-day challenge, there's such a clear signal that like I want this. You
Mhm.
know, I'm posting once or twice a week. It's like, okay, that's cool. You know, he's posting more. Posting every day though, there is such a clear signal, especially for the people who follow me, who see all my stuff, like that I want this, that I want to be here, that I want to that I am all in on this path of expressing on these platforms and growing a channel. And as I'm starting to see more people within kind of my niche, these more spiritual inclined people who are starting to post again, who have not been posting, who probably had to work through a lot of resistance to coming back onto these platforms, um, I see and feel this flavor of like neutrality. We've talked about neutrality before, of just like, I'm just here to express myself. And another way to say that is I see people that are very careful to not claim that they actually want people to follow them.
Yeah.
It's like almost like that the idea that the desire to grow a following, the desire to want people to follow you, which also touches on some elements of hierarchy, right? Like I want people in my following to look, you know,
Hmm.
like there's a resistance to that, and I am chewing on that idea a lot
Yeah.
recently, and I think there's a really healthy way to relate to that. And I think if
Hmm.
most people were honest with themselves, they would actually realize that they do want people to follow them. And so I think that's part of the I think the message that I'm wanting to signal and trying to do it in a good way, is showing that like it's okay to want people to follow you. It's okay to want a following. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. I feel like as you're just touching on that, I'm recalling my days living in Sedona, which, in so many words is just like a spiritual new age mecca. And I feel like one of my takeaways of living there almost 3 years was basically like the quote unquote more spiritual someone is, it's like the more like you just can sort of look in regards like how is this person traumatized? Like how is this person wounded? What area have they disassociated from of life completely? And just like discovering that like an uncanny amount of people who've been abducted by aliens are like orphans or were molested or have like deep belonging issues in their families. That's a whole rabbit hole in regards to like what happens to people, what draws them to like uber spirituality. There's some kind
Yeah.
of profound, tension grid between like the more quote unquote spiritual you are, like the more likely you feel like extremely deeply disenfranchised in your childhood or something like this. That's not 100% true. That's obviously a big generalization. And I guess I'm just wanting to, amongst many things, make a nod towards like what is this like I would call it super integral lifestyle where on the one hand you can own like, yeah, I want to make a lot of money. Yeah, I enjoy being seen. Yeah, my message is awesome and I like sharing it and it feels really good when it lands with people who can benefit from it, et cetera, et cetera. And I also happen to be like, a yogi and I've, had these incredible experiences and quote unquote spiritual realms and they inform my process. Like we're just in the beginning stages of having, people who are good exemplars of bringing all those different things together. So
Yeah.
my hat is certainly tipped off to you in regards to the way that you're, bringing these different worlds together. Um,
Yeah. 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 And there's just also bringing in a lot of humanists here. There's definitely moments where I'm posting a lot and I'm getting like, very little engagement. And it's like, the fuck's
mhm.
what the fuck's the point of this? And and it brings me back, because obviously I am doing it for some level of enjoyment. Otherwise, I would never last. And there's also a deep desire to find the people and to hopefully be sharing things that are landing. So I think it's that's such a
Yeah,
interesting, wild thing to relate to is like the why behind all of this, and
yeah,
yeah, just again the desire to reach people and the desire for high levels of engagement and
yeah,
like how to relate to that in a good way. I think is such an interesting
yeah.
topic.
Well, for sure. I mean, from my perspective, it's like mythopoetically, you're at the archery range, you know that you want to be hitting bullseyes and you're getting your reps in. So there's a lot to be said about that. But I want to ask a kind of a double click question on this because I think we are getting our finger on the pulse on something. And it's a concept that I think both of us really resonate with I think we both heard Wade Skin articulate it in regards to like entering into truth telling arenas,
Yeah.
and in a certain way, like the amount of likes you're getting or the amount of engagement you're getting on Instagram is some kind of quote unquote truth telling. And you're in the arena and we've waxed on this a lot and getting off the high horse into the arena. So bless you, man, you're in the arena
Mm,
And I guess what I'm trying to get to as a question is there's some kind of dance we're doing between our fantasy of how things will go or what we imagine things will go. We could even say like uninformed optimism, like we're just optimistically, maybe somewhat foolhardily, or just be like, I'm going for this, and we hope for the infinite upside.
mm,
And then there's getting in there and having to deal with the realities. And I think this is where like amazing mindsets are forged. And I
mm,
want you to speak to this because I experience you consistently having a really dope mindset, which I think is going to, lead to incredible things. One of the
mhm,
things I admire most about you, amongst many others. And there's something about this like imagination, we could say spiritual or mythopoetic thing around what we hope is going to happen when we get in the arena. And then the way the truth hits us, like we get these hits of reality, like no one's engaging or, no one's
yeah,
reading my shit or, I was hoping it would go viral and it's actually like, looks like it's dead
yeah,
in the
yeah.
water. And so I think you get the
Totally,
kind of
man.
spirit of my question. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's there. I mean, and I feel like your question is touching on the idea of the lightning strike to the lightning wielder, or the
Mm.
lightning chaser to the lightning wielder in a way for me. I can't tell you how many posts I have created with the raw feeling that this is the one. This is the one. And again, I can confidently say, and I'm not even saying that it's a bad thing, just honestly for me, I'm not creating posts with the intention of going viral. I'm not like, okay, how can I, spin this to really reach virality? That's not my process. And there's some moments when I'm creating where I just really feel like there's something here. I can feel it. It feels so good. It feels so exciting. It's like, oh my God, like this might be it. And I genuinely feel that I'm gonna check this back in a few hours and I can see that this just blows up. Um, and so I think the learning curve is learning how to relate to that feeling because on a very um, basic level, without any story on top of that sensation, it's so beautiful and pleasurable and
Mhm.
exciting. So I think it's more about like just how to relate to that and maybe less of this is going to be the one, more of just like, yo, this creation stream feels so good and just being able
Yeah.
to bathe in that.
So I love what you're saying so much. And I feel like it's a feeling and an experience that's really worth teasing apart, really addressing well, because I can very much relate to this sense of I'm doing something and there's like this is the one kind of feeling. And there's a lot to be said about how important that inner feeling is, the
Mm,
confidence, even the sense of clarity. There's this almost like entrepreneurial grit to it of like, I know this is possible and I'm therefore taking action on it. And and at least in my experience, I don't know how you relate to this, there can be a demoralizing feeling, especially as it relates to digital media. It can happen in life itself with like people and experiences around seeing that from like the vantage point of the truth telling arena, it's not the one, it's just a one.
yeah.
And roll up your sleeves because you're going to need to do it, 30 more times this month for the.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I can tell I'm hitting it on the head there with your smile there. So please take
Right.
it away.
Well, yeah, I just love the simplicity and the potency of the one versus a one. And like just that shift is astronomical. It's huge and I think it really it touches it hits the hammer on the nail of like I think the entire tension of uh pursuing something worthwhile. Anything, whether that's a creative suit, whether that's a business idea, really anything. It like that is the tension, the one versus a one, and I think really um the exploration I want to go down with you right now is like how to relate to them because that seems to be where we get caught up, right? Is where we are too heavily attached to one or the other. Like for me, what I was just speaking to is how my attachment to the one um, leads to letdown. So like how to relate to that better.
Yeah.
But then I could see on the other side of it that for some people who maybe are so deeply in like a one,
Hmm.
maybe there is maybe they could use more time with like the one, because
Yeah.
there is something really, I think there is something really beautiful in a place at the table for
Hmm.
relating to something as if it is the one. But I think it's
Yeah.
just maybe a different maturation of how we're holding it. So I would love to hear you riff on like
Hmm.
how to relate to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it brings to mind one of my favorite books, which we've riffed on a lot, and we'll probably come back around many, many times, which is The Art of Learning by Josh Waitzkin, which had this inspiration like earlier this week to want to reread it and just maybe use some of my winter break, so to speak, to revisit that classic. So good. It's just such good storytelling. And he touches on this from the perspective of breaking down growth mindset, but then also the way in which he witnessed as he was transitioning from being just like a chess player to a chess teacher, the way that his observations, the way he observed different parents relating to their kids.
Mm,
So the way he describes this is that for some parents, they learn about growth mindset and then they say to their kids something to the effect of, don't worry about win or losing. It's all about the process. You're in the process.
mm-hmm.
You're at the training camp. Like, you didn't win this time or you lost this time, but, you're growing,
Yeah.
which really takes an important piece of the growth mindset, which is being involved in the process, staying with the process, knowing you're on this long arc of growth.
Right.
What Waitskin says, which really misses the mark, is that there's also a certain kind of lying in that happens between like a parent and a child because of course winning matters to the kids.
Yeah.
Of course they want to win. Of course a game becomes the game. And if you're not honest about that, then you're actually debilitating your ability to use growth mindset for its explicit purpose, which in this case would be winning a chess match. But in this kind of context is actually like I do want this post to represent the best quality and have it the best shot to be of maximum benefit or whatever we're optimizing for. So there's a really interesting both and, which I think is marrying together these tensions, which is on the one hand to say, yeah, this is just a post and it's going to be one post of 30 this month, or I'm thinking of Hermosi, and he had some ridiculous metrics where he was saying like his whole team took every single platform on social media, LinkedIn, blah, 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 YouTube, and they were just like cramming like a ridiculous amount of content through the machine, so to speak. And he has this whole math brain in terms of what that leads to for them and blah blah blah. So that's one epitome of quantity and staying in the process and expecting a certain result. But I think where we probably land in this whole axis of genius mythos, and certainly where Waitskin lands, is all about quality, which is how to make something really reflective of the best you can possibly do, and then also maybe in like a deeply Buddhist sense or a deeply philosophical sense, like, and be unattached. This
Yeah.
is the best I can do today. It's the best of my knowledge today. I'm not going to lie about the fact that it really matters to me. Like, I'd really prefer for this to go really well, and I'll
Yeah.
be let down if it doesn't. And also to have resilience and grit and say, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. So beautiful, man. Thanks for unpacking that. The Art of Learning, Josh Whiteskin. Highly recommend anyone who's listening check that book out. But just such a perfect example, and it really lands a lot deeper now. And it's touching on something that um, we talked about earlier in the conversation that I mentioned, like how to relate to the desire to want more followers. Like that could be an example of like winning in the case of posting on social media, because posting on social media is different than winning a chess game, right? Like
Yeah, the
we can
little Freudian social mania.
yeah.
It's a good little slip. Winning on social mania.
um, but yeah, there's like, what does winning on social media even mean? Um,
Yeah. Mm.
Social media.
On social mania.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so now you got me off my thought, but no, anyway, um, just like how to relate to that in a way, it's like um, it's reminding me of something I've been thinking a lot as well. The tension between just being in flow with life versus having goals. Like, so for people who are listening, I do this 45-day program called The Forge that we've mentioned before. And that I've done it twice now, and there's such a big part of it is goals, is having goals for the 45 days, and it's still something that I'm still figuring out. Like people, especially in the spiritual community, have such a hard time with goals.
Yeah.
What is the hidden harmony of goals and flow,
Hmm.
of surrendering to life versus having clear goals that you don't just fall off the wagon with because a couple days out of the week you're not inspired by them, or they're feeling hard and distant, or there's quote unquote
Yeah.
resistance, you know? And so I just I can feel the through line of everything that we're talking about. Um and I think, the white skin example is so perfect of that. It's not either or, it's a both and. So
Mhm.
um yeah, I'm curious if anything comes up for you there. And
Well, of course. Well, I think this tension of being able to have a goal and execute on the goal and have some degree of like the fuck your mood, stick to the plan, which we were, riffing on, which is in a lot of
right,
situations really necessary. I would even say mission critical to achieve certain things with continuity is to be able to say, I'm
right.
feeling this way today, but I need to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
frankly, too many people in our community are too far on the other side and say, like, I don't feel like it today. And, my feeling and my inspiration and my spiritual
Right.
practice are all sort of woven together. And they're
Always
constantly,
supposed to feel good.
you're always supposed to feel good. And, if the muse isn't like rocking your world, then, you have to like do a 40-day cleanse or something.
Right.
This is kind of the, that's sort of what you see.
365 days semen retention.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like you've been blowing your load too many times. So now you got to seal it up for 40 days and get back on track. Don't know anyone like that. Anyway. Uh, um, shit. Now I'm losing my frame of reference over here.
Well,
Um, what are we talking about?
let me throw something back at you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, well, you're talking about how most people in our spiritual community, most people, that might listen to this, maybe they're on the side of the spectrum of like, they don't have the problem of forcing it too much. They have maybe the problem of
Yeah,
running
yeah.
away from any tension or resistance. But something I just want to like quickly tie in and then throw it back to you so that we can get back on track is like the idea that having a goal will get in the way of the flow,
Yeah.
or having a goal will get in the way of life. That seems to be like the core fear here. And so if we're just kind of applying that to the overall theme of what we're talking about, it would be that like
Yeah.
having the desire to uh, grow on social media, to quote unquote win, to
Hmm.
have followers, that's somehow going to get in the way of just like the process of creation and expression.
Yeah.
So different words saying the same thing, but like this fear that the goal is going to get in the way of life, going to get in the way of life flowing. So just wanted to tie
Yeah.
that in.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think we can thread the needle really beautifully here. When just to kind of use some of the energy that's present for people who shall not be named, but who are nonetheless influencing us now. There's this sense of, speaking very cryptically, there's this sense that, quote unquote, the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. Of like the flow that can be named is not the true flow. If I'm making a plan, if I'm naming what I want to have happen, that can't be God, that can't be the flow, that can't be the Tao. And to me, that's like a fundamental misapprehension of the creative volition of who we are as human beings. We
Yeah,
are one and the same of the Tao. We are the expression of the Tao. If Blake is saying it, such is the nature of the Tao is saying it. It's like there's
right.
this fabric of unity. It's always present. And I think one of the things that happens actually within our spiritual communities quite often is you have people playing out separation and victimhood in a way which is basically just a cop out from doing hard work. If you like really, really actually boil it down, it's
Mm.
like you see this all the time. It's like, well, my human design is like this, so I'm not really like that, and so therefore I
Uh-huh.
need more rest and blah blah blah. And it's like, so you don't really just want to work. Is basically like if you really boil it down, it's like, oh, your astrology is now a convenient excuse as to why you're not going to do hard work, or pick
Right.
any number of these different systems that come into play where, yeah, sure, sometimes they align us with a deeper sense of how to do our work ethic or how to do an approach, but it's way more common that people use these things as an excuse just to avoid doing the hard thing.
Right.
So that's one whole approach. I mean, please take us away from here.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I definitely I definitely see that a lot, and I think yeah, what you're saying is there's a part of me that wants to advocate that these systems can be used in ways that are beneficial, but we see that they are used in an excuse to affirm not having to do something. And I think it really hits on the idea that we already mentioned, that like the idea that life's always supposed to feel really good.
Yeah.
And so if what I'm working on, if the thing that you're trying to create, whatever it is, if somehow it's not feeling good, then we should probably stop, or that means to run in the other direction. Um,
Hmm.
which I think is missing the point of a lot of this.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the tie-in here, which I think is quite beautiful and ingenious, is we came into this conversation riffing on how there's this missing niche around training camps for artists specifically. And what's so badass about athletics is anyone who's achieving within a certain degree of athletics knows it's kind of like a no pain, no gain mindset. It's like you
Right.
have to overcome your resistance, you have to do the hard thing. The other team is definitely doing the hard thing. So if you're not doing the hard thing at the same degree or even more, you're just going to lose.
Right.
But artists somehow don't have that same kind of mindset. There's not the same kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
mentality. There's, some Steven Pressfield out there, and some people get the sense of like, oh, I need to work hard to be able to achieve. But it's way, way, way more common that people feel like they should just, have made something brilliant. It's reflective of feeling really good, or they are integrating a ceremony and it's like their stroke of genius. And then when they discover it's not the one, it's just a one, and they got to
Hmm.
keep rolling up their sleeves and getting to work, they don't have that same athletic mindset of, oh, of course, like this is just another day in my training camp. They have the mindset of, oh, this is so common with artists because this is a failure, this deeply reflects on who I am as a human being. My
Right.
my post didn't do well, therefore I'm don't do it. Like I'm worthless.
Right.
And that entanglement of personal identity and the value of your art and
Yeah, yeah.
encode like that's one of the most toxic, treacherous, trauma
Right.
vortex places ever. That's the
Right.
quicksand.
Yeah. We're really, speaking to different, I think, stages of development. And I think what we're advocating for, this kind of training mentality, is, not to say, well, you could say one's better or worse, but like, not to judge or shame or anything like this, but um, like one of the stages that I feel you speaking to that I have spent a lot of time thinking about is like in the spiritual community when, you know, it's kind of an initial stage where I feel like, but everything's all of a sudden about safety. Like everything is about safety. Like you go into a space, and every time you go into a space, there's 10 intentions and 5 deep breaths and 2 ohms and like it's so hype. And of course, we want to feel safe, and that's beautiful. But there's like this hyper safety thing where it feels like everyone has pillows on them. And I think that um, at that sort of stage, we really abandon any kind of critical feedback or like what you're speaking to. And I think a part of that is because so many of us have wounding around high school coaches in sports or whatever the hierarchical figures were, that were the ones that were probably judging us a lot and telling us to stop doing it, or however that looked for you. We most of us didn't experience a really healthy model for feedback and for furthering our learning. And so, yeah, I see that missing because of that. And I just, yeah, I think it's such um, a critical piece to what we're speaking to, of
Hmm.
being able to receive feedback again. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think in the creative journey and in the journey of self-actualizing our gifts, there's a toggle between optimism and pessimism.
Mm,
And optimism is the upside in the sense of, if I put in the effort or if I put in the time, if I put in the reps, if I put in the right mindset, if I understand what makes a post go viral or, any number of things, if I apply knowledge correctly, a good thing will come. That basic understanding of cause and effect is so key. That makes a good gardener, so to speak. That makes a good, archer who shows up at the range and knows he can get the bullseyes.
yeah.
However, the movement into the truth telling arena is often a grappling with pessimism. It's like, yes, you can get that bullseye, but it's going to take more than 45 days. It's going to actually be half a year and it's going to transition from autumn to winter. Winter's going to get cold. Are you going to be able to stay warm amidst like your training regimen? It's like
Right.
it's like we set the expectations at the peak of summer and we're like, it's always going to feel good outside.
Yeah.
And then we get to winter and it's like it's cold outside. And do I like what was even in my mind when I set out saying I could hit bullseyes in the archery range, so to speak? So I'm just painting this image, right, of the grappling of optimism with the truth-telling nature of the arena, which can really get us into states of pessimism about
Yeah.
what we think is really possible.
Right. Which man, it speaks so loudly to, I think, the importance and immense benefit of being in communities, networks of people who are doing that together, and who also have figures within the ecosystem, or like, the ecosystem the community is based on, or speaks about people who have achieved some level of competence and or success, who can directly reflect back to you that that is not a bug, that is a feature of the path. That, like, winter, that is, everyone goes through that. That is important, and it doesn't mean turn away.
Yeah.
Like, where that is the culture of the community, I think is so incredibly important, versus what can happen where the communities, the culture is around, like, life always feels good, so, that sort of thing. But I just wanted to tie in something that Ido Portal was riffing on a podcast that I love so much. So simple yet so clear. And he asked the people, he said, how does it feel to get stronger? Um, you feel weak, right? How does it feel to get smarter? You feel dumb, right? And for me, that's it, you
Yeah.
know, like, that's it.
So powerful. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like brings these images to mind of being on meditation retreat and the moment you're really trying to concentrate and you're like, wow, my mind is so distracted. And it is these moments of confrontation where it's like the closer you get to bringing the gap, closing the gap, the more you realize how much work there is to be done.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And, you know, we said this on a couple podcasts ago, but, like, fuck neutrality, you know? I would hate if every time I sent you something or whatever, it was just like, oh, it's so good, Blake. You're doing
Yeah.
so good. It's like, thank God that I have someone like you who can give me more critical feedback and things like this.
Mm,
In a way, it's a form of self-love, right? Like, I don't want you swimming in a circle like a one-legged duck for a year, and then,
hmm.
you not actually progressing to where you want to progress because I'm too afraid to tell you that, maybe you want to try something else or something like this, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the more influential teachers that I had in my early 20s was this yoga teacher. whom I kind of lost some respect for in recent years. So I'm not even going to mention his name. But he was really one of those teachers who, in my early days, I looked up to a lot. And I feel like his successes and admirations in terms of what he was doing were really quite great. And one of the things he did, which for me at the time, I had such a critique in undergrad of just like the whole Cartesian split. And I was like really disenfranchised with the sense of like, oh my gosh, intellectualism's gone too far, and people are just doing these cognitive exercises, and their bodies are out of shape, and the obesity epidemic. And so, like, in my early 20s, I really had like a strong like zest inside of me around like embodiment, like how do we get in our bodies, how do we make what we're up to have a mind body fusion, which in many ways is still what I'm up to, having studied somatic psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And with this particular teacher, one of the things I admired so much about what he was up to is he would do these amazing yoga classes, but then he would kind of infuse them in with like Dharma talks. So it was kind of like he was giving a lecture on a particular topic, but you were doing yoga while it was happening. And just the way he was doing that
So cool.
totally inspired me. And he had a phrase which I think about all the time, actually. It's still one of the most like relevant axioms for me, which is if you really love someone, you'll be more willing to give them feedback. Like if you're not
Mm.
willing to give them critical feedback, if you're not really willing to talk to them about what's hard or difficult, like that actually is basically just saying like you don't love them enough to do that with them. And
Wow.
that's not like a black and white truth. That's not always 100% true. There's room for grace and nuance, and you can't have the conversations with everyone that you want to have, et cetera, et cetera. So respect boundaries and fragility and vulnerability, et cetera.
Yeah.
And to me, it speaks so much to the heart of what you just pointed to, which is like if you really love someone and you actually want to see them thrive, that's the person that you're willing to like look at and say like, hey, the way you just did that really
Yeah.
doesn't reflect your best work, and this is why, and this is how, and to be specific and clear and to be
Right.
uncomfortable with them as they're grappling with their own shit around that.
Right. Yeah, man. And I think for people who, which I'm one of these people who have am recovering, have recovered to some degree. Um, like for people, which is most people in our culture who have had some sort of wounding around that hierarchical figure, the coach, the father, who is where a lot of the wounding around feedback and these truth telling arenas maybe can come in. I think working your way back into some of these truth telling arenas will be one of the most potent access points into such deep like inner excavation and alchemy. And I really advocate for that because again, it's this idea of the glass ceilings, and on the other side of this glass ceiling and through the pursuit of shattering the glass ceiling is so much liberation, is so much freedom in your expression and just capacity to, I think, move through the world with a deeper like robustness within your being.
Mhm.
um, and so I really advocate for that, and I think ultimately that's kind of the through line of this entire conversation is finding your way back into a lifestyle of training, but then where the rubber meets the road is like where whatever the thing is that you are training meets the truth telling arena, where however that feedback loop looks, and then playing this infinite game of holding the what was it, the way with a way, what
Mhm.
was the word,
Um, the one and a one.
the one with a one, and I just really feel that within everything that we're speaking to. So maybe as we're landing the plane, we can kind of close the loops on the through line of the conversation. If you have anything that you want to add or point to.
Yeah. Well, I think a huge phrase here, which I was initially going to use to set up the Jake Paul stuff, which I think is also a piece of the puzzle here in regards to getting into the truth telling arenas, is the courage to fail publicly, or as it's sometimes phrased, the willingness to learn, the willingness to be seen while you're learning. Is that kind of how
Mm,
the phrase goes?
yeah, like learning through doing kind of thing.
Learning through doing, making mistakes out loud.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a huge piece of the puzzle. And I know for me, even doing this podcast, with the work I do, I've often been in like the deep listening seat where with my clients and with whom I'm with, sometimes the equation is like 95% listening and like 5% articulation, and it's just like I'm giving like these little dharma drops or like these frameworks that are like the essential points that, brings out a client's best. And I love that. And that's really near and dear to my heart. But for me, like this whole path of coming into like full articulation with you is riddled with this courage to fail publicly on a
Mm-hmm.
very, very deep level. One of the things that's motivating me immensely is I feel like a guide or a coach or a counselor or even quote unquote like the modern day therapist should more or less have like as much transparency about where they're coming from and why they do what they do and what their mindset is as possible.
Mm.
Because I think the old school therapeutic model of like, the therapist is there with the clipboard and you don't really know what's happening in their mind. I think that has primarily not worked for most people, except in exceptional cases that sometimes works.
Yeah.
Whereas, with the quote unquote like psychedelic medicine renaissance, not necessarily knowing like what the end game is of your quote unquote guide, to me, that's like a philosophical impasse where it's like,
Mm.
of course, the way that your guide or your counselor or your coach, the way they view the world is influencing you. And so it's like my thought process is like, I want to have maximally beneficial influence for the people who resonate with me the most. So this is all like in part, like this
Yeah.
courage to fail marvelously and hopefully fail wonderfully, ultimately into great success and being fully expressed such that anyone who's ever doing deep work with me can
Yeah.
know unobstructedly completely where I'm coming from and sync up with the quest that I'm on. And I think,
Yeah.
being able to sync up, you were naming it in a slightly different way earlier in the pod, which is also just equally brilliant, which is just like being able to create a lot of transparency so that we can share quests with people, share community with people, and be in resonance that makes sense for our lives and where we are and what we want to change and evolve into. To
Yeah.
me, that's a really beautiful path forward. And it's just not workable if you're hiding, if you're contrived, if you're, propping up other people's philosophical systems and not having
Right.
fully examined it for yourself.
Completely, man. I mean, I feel like we need to do a whole other pod on just what you said. Like, I think that's so juicy and something that I actually haven't quite heard articulated so clearly. The idea that, um, yeah, just the desire as a therapist, as someone who's holding space for people, and like letting go of this idea that you're a blank canvas with no desire, with no intention, with no opinions that aren't neutral in the world, and how you're orienting your life, and how that is so beneficial to people. It makes so much sense to me, and look, because of that, because of your transparency, there are going to be maybe more people who don't want to work with you because of that. And
Yeah.
the people who do want to work with you, the relationship is going to be so much more potent because of that.
Yeah.
And I think about, um, personally, I I want to work with a therapist, coach, someone who's going to hold that kind of space for me because of the nature of the work that I do. Like, I want to work with someone who is also, taking these sorts of leaps in the public sphere, who is learning through doing, who is, like, I want someone who has done the things that they're going to be asking me and helping me doing them
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
And so, and I think a part of that is deconditioning the idea that our therapists are perfect humans, that, like, you're going to have clients that watch you stumble in the podcast.
Yeah.
And, but I think on the other side of deconditioning that, it again, it just gets to take the working relationship as client and space holder, whatever it is, to new depths that just aren't able to be reached when you think your therapist is a perfect human being that's completely neutral.
Yeah. Well, for me, this is a great triple backflip to end on. And I feel like I want to iterate the Ito Portal idea of like, as we're getting stronger, we're going to feel weak. As we're getting smarter, we're going to feel dumb. And I guess by way of closing out the time, is there anything else you feel like you want to add into the conversation or any breadcrumb trails you want to lead us into the forest with for the next one or for the audience?
Yeah, I'll say two things, pass it back to you, and you can close us out. How about that? Um, One thing, again, just the Ido Portal thread, who anyone who doesn't know this guy, he's one of the experts on movement in the world, true master and genius, in my opinion. And on this podcast, he straight up admitted that, like, what he was doing 5 years ago was like wrong, pretty
Mm,
much. He just like is so comfortable to say that. And again, it's not that it was completely damaging people, but like he would 100% do what he was doing back then differently now.
yeah.
Um,
Can you give us an example? What was he talking about? His training method?
like the way that he was training people.
Oh,
He's talking about the way that he was training people and that like he would totally do it differently now.
hmm,
And I think honestly, I think if you're someone who is, and again, it's not that everything that he was doing was wrong, but just like the willingness to so clearly admit that like
hmm,
it wasn't perfect.
yeah,
Um, and the way that he bluntly said that, was really inspiring to me. And this
nice.
is literally one of the greats.
100%. I mean, it's really cool to even hear you say that because I haven't listened to that podcast yet. I've been deeply inspired by Ido Portal, and I was, very deep in his training method for like a good little bit. It's been a while, but there was a time where I was like very much in that wavelength and training with some of the people that were trained under him in Santa Cruz. And I remember as I was like scouring the YouTube for all things Ido Portal, there's like a bunch of his students that basically had like hit videos where he's like, yeah, he's cool like this, he's cool like that, but like, and they boom, 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 all the different things were like, and this fucking sucks. And I remember taking that in and being like, oh, like I really like Ido Portal, but like, where is his eccentricity like blending with madness, so to
Mm,
speak? And so I've always felt he has a really good heart. I've always felt he's coming from a really good place, and is a true artist in that regard. But it's nice to hear this sort of like public confessional. I was wrong, and this is what I'm learning. It makes me curious to learn more about it. But it also gives me the sense that, if he could have been an avant-garde artist who burned the bridges and said, "Hey, if you don't like it, you just don't get it." And it sounds like he's been more open to a more dynamic exchange of learning, which is really nice to hear.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Last thing, just to close out the conversation, um, is I want to really advocate for people to give themselves permission to want to win
Yeah.
or to have goals. As we're riffing on the one versus a one, like really being able to reawaken that place within you that wants to win, that wants success, that wants things,
Yeah.
that doesn't just want neutral, everything is equal. I don't have any goals. Like, yeah, I feel like that's kind of what we were speaking to today, and it just feels like a really important idea right now, and inside of the spiritual community as we are entering back into like truth telling arenas and things like this. It's like really being able to nurture that desire to quote unquote win.
Yeah. 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 And I'll add in not only to claim it for oneself, which is beautiful and important, but to be able to really feel it for someone else.
Mm,
Like we were just hanging out last weekend and you offered me an amazing blessing, and I felt very deeply nurtured by that. And I have this deep feeling in my bones of like, wow, like Blake is a friend who really wants to see me win, who really gets my dream. And I feel very, very similarly, if not exactly the same, in regards to just how much I want to see you win, bro.
mm,
And I feel like that's a really sweet space in regards to the kind of healing arts juju that I feel like we're really dedicated to is actually really taking deep pleasure and joy in seeing people whom we really believe in winning.
mm.
And, for me, that's like a beautiful movement into, in a sense, this is a whole nother conversation, but I'll just plant some seeds, I guess, for the future ones in terms of like the main character syndrome of our culture in regards to
Yeah.
like, there's like a sort of narcissistic sort of like new age sort of like, claim that you can win and go for your win. And then people
Right.
are, I'm going to win. And it's just like, yes. And like,
Right.
so, so sweet to have people in your corner and
Mm.
have people that you're close to, and you're like, I really care about them winning. Like, I
Yeah.
really care about you winning, Blake. And
Mm.
for me, that's just like another level of like what the heart and like the octave of connection can bring.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Closing.
Closing.
So, from the depths of our heart, please like and subscribe.
I'll wait for the day where we can do that seriously.
I know I'm totally still working out my kinks on that.
I've got it down. I feel very, very good about saying that.
Oh,
Anyway,
please role model it for us, please. For our audience. Please show
if
us how
you're
it's
still
done.
listening here, we do greatly appreciate you. It's if there is maybe one or two people, but it really means a lot. And yeah, this was a fun one. So thanks for being here. And it would be awesome if you shared it with a friend or two, and you left us a like and you followed along because we're trying to create a collective here, collective of ideas and people and influences. So um, any support, any form of sharing is very much appreciated.
Very much so. Thank you,
Hmm.
Blake.
Thank you.